thought it was interesting that I think the most recent minor collision, there were foreign journalists on board the Philippine Coast Guard vessels. So when the Chinese Communist Party put their propaganda mechanism into play and tried to start claiming that it was like the Filipino vessel who that rammed the Chinese vessel, then you had journalists from the BBC or CNN or places where they were like, "Well, I was actually there and I saw it," and then they have like an eyewitness account that will contradict the CCP's message.
Yes, yes. That's because out of the experience, basically, they learn from the experience of cooperating with Chinese demands to keep things quiet. And they basically realized that, by doing that, they allow China the opportunity to shape the narrative, to change the story, essentially. So that's why, with the transparency initiative, as they called it, the policy now is to have as much coverage, shall we say, as possible as to what's going on, whether it's video, audio, on the vessel or around it. No? And also journalists, they've allowed journalists to join these missions so that there would be a third party, essentially, that can do also the recording. So it wouldn't be just the Coast Guard versus the Chinese Coast Guard's account, but there would be independent accounts. And that has been quite effective, as you mentioned. No? Some of the Chinese attempts at twisting the story lately have been a bit laughable, actually, and even backfired against them, because at one point they accused the foreign journalists, all these journalists, of manipulating the videos and contriving these stories, no. And that was met with an immediate response from all of the journalists in the Philippines, even the ones that were before very some said were even more sympathetic to China, but they all pushed back against that.
So, as China becomes increasingly violent, how should the Philippines fight back? Is just exposing what they're doing enough?
Well, the exposure of what they're doing, essentially, I think, is what's being leveraged to gain more support, both moral and material support from other countries, which is again another thing that China does not want. China wants the smaller Southeast Asian claimants to stand alone and to deal with them bilaterally on their own without any kind of external support, assistance in whatever form. That way, they will be able to dominate any kind of negotiated settlement. But the Philippines, by doing this, has actually been attracting not only international attention, but also we've seen many countries come to the Philippines over the past year or so. Almost like every month, there's somebody new coming to hold talks, offer assistance on the maritime arena, as well as strike up new deals economically. No, because that's another aspect of it. It's also trying to increase the resilience of the Philippines against Chinese pressure on that front, on the economic front. So I think in that way, it's been effective in creating that, using it as leverage, no, to strengthen the Philippines' hand, no, by the support, through the support of other countries.
Can you talk? What countries are coming to the Philippines for this?
Well, aside from the United States, which has long been the partner, we've had much more closer coordination and assistance from East Asian countries like Japan and Korea. We've had Australia become very, very active, actually. Even India last month, and past 2 months, they've sent ships here as well as their foreign ministers, and they've expressed support for the Philippine position on the South China Sea and West Philippine Sea. We've had countries from Europe, Germany, France, they've been much more visible. France was even an observer in the latest alliance exercises. The UK as well has also been much more active than before. So they're really quite a lot. And even countries that never used to be visible, like the Czech Republic, now they've been seen, no, coming to the Philippines to discuss possible cooperation about the maritime sphere, as well as increasing economic linkages.
That's interesting because you said this was ultimately about China and the US, and that China was wanting to get the Philippines more isolated from all of its allies, and yet it's having the opposite effect, where it seems like the Philippines is getting more allies.
Yes, yes. Actually, that's why we are saying we, in a way, we also have to thank Xi Jinping because he's the reason why these things are happening. It's backfiring on them, and even I think we see it even in the way that their propaganda has been coming out increasingly shrill and sometimes ridiculous. That's a sign, I think, that the Philippine posture right now in the policy is become very effective.
I would also say that the Philippines has come up with a very clever strategy militarily, which is that they see that China is strong when it comes to its Navy and its Coast Guard. So the Philippines is not fighting back on their ground. The Philippines is fighting back by using its own strength against China's weakness, which is the exposure of the truth, right? Using video and drone footage and inviting journalists on and building alliances based on trust. Those are all the CCP's weaknesses. So yeah, I would just point out that it's a very clever, essentially military strategy without actually being military.
Well, yes, that's true. Our military has also, in a way, adjusted and adapted. They know that they cannot confront China one on one. Okay, and so military has actually been keeping, shall we say, a low profile when it comes to interactions with China. They're in the background and they're present and they're aware, and they also conduct their own activities. But you see that they're not in the news as much as, say, the Coast Guard. But in the meantime, the alliance relationship has really strengthened in the past year or so. We had the bilateral defense guidelines being agreed to last year. And a month ago, we had the largest Balikatan exercises between the Philippines and the US. And that was joined by observer countries. So and the Philippine military has also been shifting as well its posture now. Before we were only concerned with internal security operations against communist rebels and Muslim secessionists. Those issues are now almost resolved. So the military is now reorienting itself towards external defense. And it's really trying to find ways to accomplish that. No? And that's, again, something that um, China probably doesn't want to happen. Okay, because again, they see us merely as areas to dominate for their own defense. So they wouldn't like it if the Philippines were to strengthen its own defense apparatus.